Good morning and welcome. It's Sunrise Daily. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Good morning from Abuja. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf.
Well, please go ahead, Maupe. It's on your side.
Indeed, I will, Ayo. Well, this morning we're very pleased to have with us in the studio Mr. Iro Akeriga, who is the bureau chief of the Guardian newspapers here in Abuja. Oh dear, I'll be very grateful, if this talk back will be corrected. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Akeriga, welcome and a very happy new year to you.
Good morning, same to you. I always feel a sense of patriotism to be in the studio.
A sense of patriotism. Yes. It means I'm a Nigerian every day.
Of course.
A real Nigerian doing a good job every day,
Absolutely.
If that's what you say. But we're very happy to have you this morning to take a look at the papers with us. Let's start with this one, New Telegraph. We saw the story yesterday. A statement was released from the presidency. Their big headline: Kuka offended Nigerians with anti-Buhari remarks, as according to the presidency. Faults Muslim groups quit notice, ultimatum to Bishop. It's on page 3 of the paper. There's a quote there. Father Kuka has greatly offended many with his controversial remarks against the government and the person of the president, with some even accusing him of voicing anti-Islamic rhetoric. Individuals like Bishop Kuka must respect the feelings of his fellow Nigerians in his private and public utterances. Well, Bishop Kuka is no stranger to controversy, he has been on the pulpit and also in political life. I mean, he's been very involved in the return of democracy to Nigeria. He's been very involved in writing and chronicling some of the atrocities that happened, during the period of the military junta. I think he was also on the panel, the Oputa panel, that chronicled some of the ills. And he's played a very active role in the transfer of power from, one party to the next. Recall the peace meeting. So this, for some people might say it's a tad strange. Did it hit you differently?
Well, I think it is very sad that certain elements, particularly from the northern part of Nigeria, are perceiving Reverend Father Kuka's comments as anti-Muslim, anti-Islam, anti-Buhari, and all of that. These rhetorics are not good for national cohesion or unity. I must also make the point here this morning that, as you rightly said, Kuka has been very, very consistent, whether politically. He's on the National Peace Committee with General Abdulsalam Abubakar, and they've traversed the length and breadth of this country. In the last elections, he and General Abubakar went to Edo State, across the state, getting candidates to sign peace accord for, peaceful elections. And Reverend Father Kuka is a man that Bishop Kuka is a man that speaks truth to power. Right. So for anybody to say at this point that, Kuka is attacking anyone, I mean, it means such individuals are not familiar with his own line of thought. He's a highly mentally cerebral person who is very honest, a patriotic Nigerian. Everybody knows that. And my worry, I have friends across all the religious divide, whether Christians or Muslims. As a journalist, I have lots of friends across. And if we want to build a country, we must have this sense of tolerance for the views of others. And Bishop Kuka has his right within his powers to express his views. And nobody should say that Kuka also criticized Jonathan. He criticized even the late Yaradua and Obasanjo. He criticized him. He's been very consistent. If you're doing the wrong thing, he's going to tell you are doing the wrong thing. And if you're doing something good, of course, he's going to applaud you. As you can also see with Pastor Tunde Bakare and all of that. So like we have a lot of Nigerians who are speaking truth to power. And when you speak truth to power, it is not enough for people, particularly the presidency. I think they are just quite intolerant about
so that could be, I mean, that definitely, but part of what they're trying to do, I mean, even though what was highlighted here is Kuka offended Nigerians with anti-Buhari remarks, but basically, is that part of tolerance? What one of the statements tried to do was talk about tolerance. It says, faults Muslim groups quit notice, ultimatum to Bishop. I do know that on more than one occasion, I've had the privilege of, interviewing Bishop Kuka, and I've asked him about, religious tolerance in Sokoto. He is the Bishop of Sokoto Diocese, and we all know that that is the center of the caliphate here in Nigeria. And he says, the people of Sokoto are so tolerant that they actually call him their bishop. He is the bishop of Sokoto, as it were, and that's how even the Muslims see him. So this ultimatum being given by this group, should we say we're taking it lightly, especially on the back of recent warnings by the DSS, saying that, some people are, trying to incite or stoke religious violence across the country? What are your thoughts? Did you see it in that light at all?
Well, I also think that those who are giving this, there is a tendency, a preponderance of certain sections of the country, or certain individuals or groups, giving other Nigerians, other citizens, quit notices to leave certain regions. Once you are a Nigerian citizen, you have the right you have the constitutional right to live in any part of this country. So nobody, no faith-based group have the right to issue quit notices to anyone for that matter. So this quit notice to Bishop Kuka, to anybody in the first place, is ab initio very wrong. It is unconstitutional. It is illegal. It's marks of extreme intolerance, sorry to say. So I think it should be ignored. It should be consigned to the trash can. And the DSS has a responsibility here. Those issuing the quit notices must be brought to explain why they are issuing such notices. Is it within their right to ask other Nigerians to leave certain parts of the country? Is that not actually stoking ethnic tension, religious tension, as it were? Because if you are asking, for example, Christians to leave some parts of the north, then Christians in maybe the southern part of Nigeria will be asking Muslims to also leave. Where are we headed with all of that? The problem really has to do with our constitution. The constitution that promotes, that promotes religion much more beyond citizen patriotism. For example, you are filling forms to be employed in government agencies and all of that. You'll be told to specify your faith, whether you're Muslim or Christian, the part of the country you come from, your local government and all of that. All of these are discriminatory against the rights of citizens to live in any part of this country. And you also see the federal government sponsoring faith-based organizations on pilgrimages, whether they are Muslims or Christians. All of this should stop. And that is why people have this tendency to think that, once you belong to one particular faith, you are possibly superior to the other and all of that. We must decamp from all of these thoughts so that we can collectively build a country.
Did that statement underscore it enough? The statement that was released by the presidency, did that statement send that message home enough?
Yes, I think for the statement by the presidency saying that, condemning the quit notice, that is very reassuring. It is commendable. But the presidency must also go beyond that to actually get the DSS or the security agencies to take some people in and use them as examples. Because when you issue quit notices to other Nigerians and nothing is done, then of course it becomes a norm for people to issue notices. When those who issue these notices must be arrested, they must be questioned and possibly put on trial so that they can tell Nigerians where they are deriving such rights from and such powers from. It's very important. Let me also add that Dr. Khalid Abubakar, the Secretary General of the Jamaatul Nasrul Islam, he has a PhD, and for me, for many of us who are watching his comments, it's a bit below the mark. It is unexpected of somebody who has attained that height of academic qualification. There are ways you pass your comments across. If you disagree with anyone on the basis of his views, you could either go to court or state your own views in the public domain and not to issue quit notices and then issue threats to people.
Well, a number of other stories are making the rounds here, just beneath the nameplate. Buhari, Kalu, Tinubu, Governors Ohaneze, Mon, Ndubisi, Kanu. You saw that story yesterday, obituary yesterday, very sad one. Pages 3 and 7 hold the story. You also see the NSAS, hashtag NSAS, 233,000 candidates to receipt SSC papers. How did that happen? It's on page 4 of New Telegraph. You might want to pick it up. But Ayo, I'll let you have the next paper.
It's interesting that Ehud, looked at that newspaper, the New Telegraph took that story from that angle. Ehud, maybe I want to put you on trial a bit here, because sometimes it's the responsibility of the editor to lead, the charge of the story. That's the angle of the New Telegraph to that story. But look at how the Daily Independent puts the same story this morning. Presidency backs Kuka on right to practice faith. Presidency backs Kuka on right to practice faith and politics. Says he may have stepped on toes while attacking Buhari. Cautions Islamic group over stance on the bishop. And then if you look at the lead story of the Nigerian News Direct, it says, ultimatum, leave Father Kuka alone. Presidency tells Islamic group. And all of that. We'll come to the other one later. But if you look at this, Iho, how is the responsibility of the editor here in shaping opinion about a particular story?
You can see that the Daily Independent story has the capacity to calm frayed nerves, because it is, there's all of these comments coming from whether the Islamic groups, and you also see that certain Christian groups or certain Christian leaders are also responding to the threats by these Islamic groups. That is not going to help the country, and the statement from the presidency is very reassuring today. I'm sure whether it is those issuing the threats from the north or those countering the threats, everybody now knows that the presidency has backed Kuka, even though the Christmas homily by Bishop Kuka actually targeted the Buhari administration, pointed out all the deficiencies of the government and what he thinks, in his own views, in his own opinion, what he thinks that the presidency can do right to move Nigeria as a country forward and to better the lives of Nigerians. I think that is the responsibility of citizens. When you elect, beyond even being a bishop, it is within the rights of Bishop Kuka to speak to those in power, to those we have all collectively elected. If you're elected...
One moment, Mr. Akelga. You have already dealt with that issue generously. The angle I'm trying to get you to is the angle of the editor, who handles the story and takes it from a particular perspective. When those things come up, we are looking at the same story here, same source, different angles by different editors. Sometimes one wonders, what is it that goes on in the mind of the editor before captioning a story, and what is the intent? What do you think?
Yeah. Basically, in mass communication theory, there's a theory in mass communication that talks about selective perception. Now, when there is a content, a news story, which is the content now, editors can interpret what that same story is from different perspectives. That is within the theory of selective perception. What you see as black may be seen by another editor as white. But basically and generally, all editors have a responsibility, to build national cohesion, to promote peace and stability of the country with the kind of stories they put in the papers. That is why you see in the papers this morning, you not see that the story is treated with incendiary languages. It is, yes, you could see that the headlines are capturing the story from different, using different languages, but they are saying the same thing. Now, for the Daily Independent, it captured the story from the angle of the presidency, whilst I think the New Telegraph that I spoke extensively about captured the story from the rhetorics coming from the two sides. Basically, it is within the right of the editors to put the contents across the way they perceive it.
Let's quickly take a look at the Vanguard then, because I know that many Nigerians are going to be looking at the dailies now and looking for how each one is capturing that particular story. But let's look at the Vanguard now. You see COVID-19, stakeholders back reopening of schools if there's a big if and then you have the ... there. what are the conditions? Page 5 holds them. ASU, NANS, NUT, NAPTAN back reopening of schools on conditions. Schools not drivers of pandemic, that's according to UNICEF. Closure of varsities, unconstitutional, disastrous, that's according to Afeba Balola. And students threatening to beat up VCs, lecturers over closure. That's according to Uniben VC. I don't want to say no surprises there, but this is definitely not good. I mean, why am I laughing then if it's not? But some things just, sometimes get comical.
I think it's frustration. The students are getting very frustrated.
When you look at the story. Yes. But what's your stance, given what you already know about this virus and given where we are, the second wave and what have you not? What are your thoughts on it?
I think it cannot get worse. We're already almost at the peak level of the virus in Nigeria, and...
You're sure of that?
Yes, that's my thought. It's my opinion this morning. I don't think it's... If you look at... I spent the vacation in Delta State and in some states, and you just find that people they don't bother. The poverty level is such that when you have not found food to eat and somebody is telling you that there's a coronavirus that is going to kill you, and they just cannot connect with it. But that is where the danger lies, actually. Indeed, if we have community spreading of coronavirus across the remote areas of Nigeria, and you see that communication is not trickling down. It is those of us in Abuja, Lagos, Kano, Port Harcourt, the capital cities, we are so conscious of this. People wear face masks. I wore face mask in Warri when I was trying to fix my car, and then one of the mechanics got so close to me, I was talking, and I said, please, can you just give me a bit of this? He said, why? Oh, God, carry this thing, go, and all. So, and all of that descended on me as if I was the only one wearing face mask.
As if you're the one that brought the corona.
Yeah, as if I haven't brought the corona from Abuja. They said, if there's anything like that, I must be carrying it. So that is the perception, Yeah. And I think that the government really needs to do more, step up the National Orientation Agency, the Ministry of Information and all culture. They need to, drum it down that indeed the virus is spreading. Now, as for the reopening of schools, it is very important. It is essential now that the students must have to go back. But what is also very important is that the management of the various universities must put in place strategic preparation, such that when the students return, when wearing of masks should be very compulsory, as it were, and then, of course, washing your hands with running water, with soap and all of that, it should be mandatory, and then social distancing within the lecture halls. So these are very important, non-medical procedures that the management of universities can adopt to also put at bay the spread of the virus. Some are saying that the universities are going to be super spreaders, but I don't think I share that view.
Well, you have a number of other stories. I'm a little spoiled for choice now because you can only comment on one more. Currency outside banks rises 55% to 2.3 trillion naira in 5 years. That's one. Navy warns Niger Delta militants over threats to resume attacks. Clark to Akpabio, stop meddling in NDDC affairs. Federal government sued over sole administrator for NDDC. That's also there as well. Then you also see this one. Ex-soldiers protest pension arrears at Finance Ministry. You're only allowed to comment on one. What's your choice?
I would like to speak on the Niger Delta. I was at the event yesterday where, the sole administrator of the NDDC visited Chief Edwin Clark. Chief Edwin Clark is a notable Niger Delta leader, well respected, the First Republic Minister of Information and all of that. Now, I think the bane of the crux of his comment has to do with the East-West Road, which is being constructed almost more than 10 years or so. Perennially, nothing has been done. And the sole administrator of the NDDC was informing Chief Clark yesterday that the Ministry of the Niger Delta Affairs, of course supervised by Minister Akpabio, and the NDDC, we are going to collaborate to complete the road. And, Clark was very livid with that comment that why would Kano, for example, has the federal government is spending about 60 billion naira to construct 3 major roads in Kano, whilst the East-West Road, which is a major economic hub, from the north to the south, is being left, to be constructed by funds meant to develop other key infrastructures of the Niger Delta. And I think I agree with him. If the federal government can't construct 3 roads in Kano with 60 billion, and then you have the Ministry of the Niger Delta, the budget is 18 billion, and Akpabio says he's going to spend 16 billion of that amount on that road. And the NDDC is going to also pull out the necessary funds to develop the Niger Delta in collaboration with the Ministry of Niger to build that road. So a lot of Niger Delta indigenes are very livid, and I think that is also why the militants, while I think the militants should not sabotage oil facilities and all of that, it is also very incumbent on this administration. I commend the Buhari administration. If you look at the Niger Bridge, it is being built. The work there is moving at a rapid pace, unlike the rhetoric of the past that, we are going to build that bridge. So we think the presidency should do more, focus on developing the Niger Delta, curb corruption within the interventionist agency, whether it's the Ministry of Niger Delta or the NDDC and all of that. The sole administrator alluded to that previous administrators of the NDDC, many of them did not actually comply with extant regulations, governing how monies accruing to the NDDC was spent. So all of that, are issues that the EFCC and the ICPC should have looked at, and people should actually be in jail. I think the impunity is what is also causing a lot of these problems.
Well, the Niger Delta is a whole story. It would take 3 days at least to look at it. But let's go to Lagos now. Ayo, what's the next paper?
Well, trust me, Niger Delta Master is not just 3 days. It will take a whole lifetime. But let's very quickly look at two new newspapers. Nigerian News Direct, of course, I mentioned it earlier. Its story, its paper leads with ultimatum, leave Father Kuka alone. Presidency tells Islamic group. Fani Kayode, Sheikh Husani, Omokri react. We've spoken extensively about that one. But if you flip to the front page of your newspaper, the Guardian newspaper, while textiles sector remains on brink despite interventions, Executive Order 003 of 2017, only on paper, government major culprits. Want to find out who said that? Fewer than 25 of over 300 textile companies in operation. While Nigeria cannot export raw cotton despite boom, with consistent policies, Nigeria has huge potential, says Ogunlesi, and WTO exposed Nigerians to cheaper textiles. It will seem like the Guardian newspaper this morning is calling for a state of emergency on the textile sector, because really, I mean, it was a big sector in earlier years of Nigeria, and now this is where we are. Tell us more about this.
Well, the Guardian has done a good job this morning by reminding all of us where the rain started beating us as a country. Beyond oil, we are talking about non-oil revenue. Between 1999 and 2021, what has successive governments done? Executive Order 003, we are going to rebuild the textile industries, monies were pumped into the place and all of that. Remain a paper tiger. Nothing has been done. And that is consecutively and successively, that is how we have managed to put the country on the spot in terms of unemployment. We have teeming Nigerian youth, graduates, and they can't find work to do. So, and just recently, the IMF has agreed to give the country $1.5 billion in loan, and we have so many of these loans coming in. Why? Now, it beats my imagination why we are unable as a country, this time when I'm talking about government, is unable to put a lot of these resources in specific sectors. For example, if you look at Oshodi those days, Kanu and certain areas where you see Nigerian fabrics, Ankara and all of that, these were materials, these were fabrics that put Nigeria on the global map in terms of local production of fabrics. Now we have lost cotton production, where the textile, the garment factories have all shut down, and the impact of that is unemployment. So the Guardian is saying this morning that we can go back to where we lost the track, where we missed the road, and then put our money where our mouth is. That is what the Guardian, that is the import of what the Guardian is saying this morning. And that when governments sign orders, orders are meant to be implemented almost immediately. You see what happens in the U.S. If the U.S. president signs any executive order, it is implemented almost immediately. But here it appears as if, we just sign these orders by way of trying to pretend that we are serious about what we want to do, while whilst importantly, we are just not serious. We are playing to the gallery. So the Guardian has done a good job of that this morning, and it is a reminder to government that that is a sector that actually needs its attention.
Well, a number of other papers to look at, but we're totally out of time because you're dealing with each one so succinctly this morning. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us this morning and speaking it how you feel it this morning. Igor Akariga is the bureau chief of The Guardian here in Abuja. Again, thanks for coming on Sunrise Daily.
Thank you very much.
The program continues shortly. Please stay with us. You just saw a snapshot of what it is that we'll be looking at this morning. Security, especially as it affects the primary level of cover, which is the Nigeria police. Yes, they have the first line of duty, or their first assignment, is to protect the Nigerian people, and they're supposed to be the first line of cover, at least internally, within the country. But all has not been well for a number of years now. The question is, are we working to get them better? At what pace are we working? There's still a number of challenges facing us in that regard. What are we doing to tackle some of those challenges? We have with us this morning Mr. Frank Umba, let's say Commissioner of Police Frank Umba, who is the Force Public Relations Officer. Welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you, Mark Bay, and good morning to our viewers. A happy new year to all of us.
May it be a happy one indeed. And congratulations on your recent promotion.
Thank you.
Well, you have seen, chronicled right there, some of the challenges that we still currently face when it comes to security in Nigeria. One of them, as was mentioned in that report, is jungle justice. And people oftentimes resort to jungle justice because they do not have confidence that if these people are taken to the police or, taken through the length of the process of the long arm of the law, that they will eventually get the justice that they deserve. Especially for the victims and also even for the people who have perpetrated whatever crime they're being accused of. What do you think the police, or not what do you think now, what do you know the police is doing to address some of these things and imbue confidence in the populace that it's protecting, as coming on the heels especially of the EndSARS protests?
Okay, thank you, Mark. If you take a look at the world overview of security situation, or you look at the global security trend, you'll discover that indeed the world is facing a lot of challenges when it comes to security. Even countries that hitherto were considered violence-free or immune from certain types of violence are beginning to experience all kinds of challenges. Globalization has not helped issues in that regard. There are so many other areas where globalization has played very positive roles. And then the issues of climate change and recently economic recessions hitting the world, and then of course compounded by the COVID-19 pandemics. And so you see a whole lot of challenges, and the truth again is that some of these criminogenic factors are things that fundamentally are not under even the direct control of the law enforcement agents themselves. But despite that, the law enforcement agents are expected to continue to deal with it. In the beginning of 2020, the projection from the Global Peace Index was that the last decade has seen a massive rise in civil unrest and riots across the world. As a matter of fact, their statistics shows that that civil unrest and riots has doubled over the last one decade, while things like general strike has actually quadrupled. If you look at CNBC report, they also projected, even in early part of 2020, that over 40% of the world will witness civil unrest. And that exactly came to happen. So it's not like, and when you play in the global league, which Nigeria is playing in, it's difficult to stay completely immune. But again, these are not reasons for law enforcement agents to abdicate their responsibilities. You are employed, trained, equipped to deal with these issues, and you must continue to deal with them. So whether there is a pandemic, whether there are problems touching with energy security, food security, environmental security, whether there are issues that has to do with economic recessions, unemployment, and irrespective of the fact that these things are tied to the general crime rate, as law enforcement agencies, you are still expected to face your mandate and deal with them. And that's exactly what we're doing in Nigeria.
So, you know, I appreciate the fact that you've set the background, the fact that, you know, security challenges are evolving. There is no doubt that is very true. However, the question is whether our own strategies, our police force, our security agencies are evolving as these challenges are evolving. Are we able to predict, for instance, I'll give you an instance with kidnapping. Kidnapping, maybe in the 90s, was not a popular crime here in Nigeria. We saw how it started, you know, in the Niger Delta with foreigners, expatriates being kidnapped, people who worked for oil companies, and before you know what's happening, it became a business of some sort, it extended to the southeast, it became everyday Nigerians, and now it's come to the north of the country and it's taken a whole new dimension all over the country. We now have banditry, for instance. Some of these things, some people will say we could have predicted and we could have acquired capabilities or, you know, training in that regard so that people have specialties, so to speak, to be able to handle these crimes. But it doesn't look like we have that already. What it looks like we've done is hands up in surrender to some of these challenges that confront us.
I politely beg to disagree. Actually, if you look at our trajectory, crime pattern and trends, you will say that the Nigeria police has done a whole lot. Let me give you an example. For example, at the beginning of the pandemic, we came up with our own analysis of the situation. We made projections. We made forecasts that were evidence-based. We said at the beginning of the pandemic, for example, that at the beginning of the lockdown that followed that followed the pandemic, we said clearly that at the beginning, in the first few days of the lockdown, there's going to be a general lull, a general drop in crime. But that subsequently, that we're going to see a rise in cybercrime. We predicted that. We said there's going to be a rise in sexual-based violence, rape, incest, and the rest of them. We did that prediction correctly. We said there's that possibility there's going to be riots because when people are held back and their means of livelihood are cut off and they begin to feel the heat and the stress of the lockdown, that they may begin to react and walk into the street. Exactly that also happens. So the truth again is we have that capacity and we do that all the time. Let me also give you a couple of other predictions that we made.
So it is one thing to predict. Some people say it's one thing to predict. The question is, what capacity did we develop to be able to tackle those things? Let me take one that is of interest to me. Sexual and gender-based violence, for instance. It was something that you correctly predicted, and it was something we saw expand and grow out of proportion during the lockdown. What capabilities, what specific capabilities would you say that the police developed over time or within that period to be able to address the emergency that will come up as a result, the emergency that will come up with SGBV as a result of the lockdown?
The moment we did that prediction, part of the things we did instantly is that the current Inspector General of Police, IGP Mohammed Abubakar Adamu, strengthened the first gender units because we expected there's going to be upsurge. So the first gender unit was immediately strengthened. And not only did we strengthen the first gender unit, we redeployed a lot of new hands into that unit, gave them specialized trainings. There were some states that hitherto they didn't have gender units, specialized gender units. We immediately set up specialized gender units in those commands. And as we were doing that, we partnered with UNICEF immediately and established a holding facility in Abuja, in Maitama, in the heart of Abuja, where we provided a kind of temporary shelter for some of the victims who spoke out. Some of the victims because some of the victims even ran out of the homes where they were being sexually molested, abused, and oppressed. And we established that homes. And we expanded our partnership with other agencies that are also involved in the fight against sexual-based violence and crime. So we did that, and we projected that very correctly, and we worked assiduously, and we also collaboratively with other agencies to begin to deal with that. But the challenge, let me just land, please. But the challenge with sexual-based violence is that sometimes these are crimes that occur screened off from the public. And sometimes a member, especially when a child or a woman is being molested by someone who has authority over her. Sometimes these are not crimes that you can easily detect. You don't have the capacity to install cameras in all homes. So it takes time sometimes before they are actually detected. Sometimes we get to know through accidental processes. A child gets pregnant, a child is infected with disease, and some other consequences which actually let the cat out of the bag. So that's the major problem. They are not like other crimes where as soon as they are happening, people get to know and people begin to blow the whistle.
But I'm sure people definitely have questions on that. Let me flip it to Lagos now, where Ayo is standing by with another guest. Ayo.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. Well, very interesting conversations you've had with the Commissioner of Police, yes, CP Frank Kumba, on that one. But we also have here, by the way, as you may have seen in the opening slide, Dennis Amakri, a security consultant and former operative of the DSS. Thanks for joining us this morning. One of the things that's made the news very, very recently is that statement from the DSS that, there are plans by some elements, as they call it, to incite religious intolerance in pockets of places all over the nation. And a number of states were actually mentioned, 6 states specifically, and it cuts across whether it's the north or the south or the east or the west. It was immaterial. That list was quite copious. So what concerns me here is, okay, that information came out. Ordinarily, how should it be actioned? How should it be acted upon?
Okay, thank you very much for having me here. And congratulations, Frank. I've congratulated you before, but I congratulate you again. This particular issue, I don't know why it is even raising dust, because this is not the first time. The DSS has come out to alert people, inform people, because it is very necessary for the security agencies, after they collect intelligence, go ahead to inform the general public on where to be very careful, and then, of course, they still go after the target, or the source of those kind of information. Those ones will not be known to the public, because they either keep a surveillance on them or, really study them properly to know where it is coming from. But I was even surprised that some elements in the Christian Association of Nigeria have to go out and say that it was a panic alert, it was creating fear and stuff like that. I think that was very, very well misplaced.
Okay. Well, so that has happened. And if that was misplaced, what then should be the reaction of people when they hear that kind of thing? And what are the people supposed to do?
When people hear an alert, what is it designed for? It is designed for you to be careful. You know, if you are going towards Surulere, be very careful. There's a riot that is going to happen there. You know, and
But given the history of Nigeria concerning religious, violence, intolerance, and all of that, should that even have come out in the first place? Shouldn't it be something that will be covertly handled by the DSS and alert the relevant security agencies who should nip it in the bud?
like I told you, the relevant security agencies have been alerted. And then, of course, the public itself has to be alerted. I'll give you an example, just something that is going on right now in the United States. Many states have armed people who are getting ready to protest on the day that the new president-elect will be inaugurated. And the FBI is aware. And they've alerted the whole country that this is what is going to happen. But meanwhile, unknown to us, they must be having those people under surveillance, following them to see that they don't achieve what they are planning to achieve. So that's how it works in the intelligence world. It is not, some people will say, why tell us? You know, if we don't tell you, you might not be aware. So when you are aware, then you take precautions that allow you to walk into it.
Okay. Well, one other issue that has made the news is, of course, that same report also says that relevant security agencies have been alerted to do the needful. But we're talking about crime and policing in Nigeria in this conversation now, and one wonders that the level of cohesion among the various security agencies. Well, one can say, for instance, in the north, one can say the police is either overwhelmed or even almost non-existent, because most of the time when we talk about insecurity in the north, many people refer their cases to the army, as opposed to the police, which is supposed to be in charge of internal security. So if you were to look at that issue from that angle, and a good number of conversations that go on, how would you say we have addressed it? I'll give you an example. We had a conversation with someone, I think it was in Katsina State, who said that there are people in the north, elements in the north, who go to the markets with a gun, AK-47 slung on their shoulders, and security agencies are aware, and no one is doing anything about it. So when people see that kind of thing, well, how do you expect them to react?
A lot of stories in the public space in Nigeria. And I can tell you one thing. Mba is there, Commissioner Mba is there to tell you that the country is under-policed. They don't have the capacity in terms of manpower to cover the ungoverned spaces that exist in this country. I remember when there was an attack in Adamawa State. You know, from one local government to the other, it takes about 4 or 5 hours before you can get to the other one. And they were attacking them. The law enforcement people cannot even get there. So one thing we could do to ameliorate this particular situation is to increase the manpower of the police. Increase the manpower. There are two things we can do, though. One is to increase the manpower, because right now, the police is under 400,000. In fact, let me tell you, the Army, Navy, Air Force, DSS, police, all put together, it's not up to 1 million. And we are 200 million Nigerians living in this country, in a very wide country. How can you police that? You know, so you either increase the capacity, or you balkanize the police. You know, get it down to the local, so that the policing itself will go down to the rural people, where they will learn how to police themselves, either through state police or local government sheriffs or whatever. Community policing, fine. But you have to train them how to do this, so that they now have the ears and eyes to watch out on what they want to do.
Well, you've brought up something that's been a touch point for me as a person, because when we talk about policing, talk about crime, talk about security, while we are expecting so much from security agencies, what do the security officials themselves expect from Nigeria? Here now, I'm talking about the morale
Yeah.
of various, security agencies across the entire architecture. We have heard cases where soldiers, protest, say they are not paid enough or not promoted enough. We have heard people in the police also say they have not been promoted, their morale is low. Some have been at the same level for so many years, leading to some of them, whether in the police, army, other security agencies, saying they're going to resign and stuff like that. On the one hand is the issue of the numerical strength of the police. On the other hand is the morale of those ones who are there. How well are we doing from what you can see?
We're not doing very well. We're not doing very well. I'm happy you have the PPRO here. And of course, it can tell you, the salary-wise, the morale is low. The morale is low because they are not well taken care of. Or should I say, the structure that they have had cocooned them into a particular hole in such a way that when it starts from training, when you go to the training school, which kind of level of training are they having, But it's not something that you want to come and talk in public, but it's something that the police authorities should look inward and do. Because a police officer who has to buy his uniform, becomes a problem when he gets onto the streets. It is very, very important because that neglect has been going on for years. The police is the mothership of all the security agencies. All of them, DSS, EFCC, Federal Road Safety, all of them came from the NSCDC, came from the police. But when you remove these people, because of special events, like when Mortala was killed, former head of state, then the NSO was formed, which later became the DSS. The NSO was formed out of that. But you try to take care of the NSO more than the mothership where they came from. So this disparity has been there. And government have to look at it properly because you cannot continue relegating them and then expecting maximum, production out of them.
Does that play any role in the synergy or otherwise with other security agencies?
Yeah, well, Nigeria's security agencies have always acted in silos. We are supposed to be having a fusion where they share intelligence. Even besides the DSS coming out from the police, they are still supposed to be sharing certain intelligence with the police. The E department of the police still produce intelligence too, and there should be a clearinghouse where this intelligence for national security should be shared among each other. But I think the silos have been existing where everybody is working on his own without sharing. But I think they are moving towards that direction now.
All right, so anyway, let's take a short break from now. I believe that we have a few messages, but I'm also sure that some of the issues that you have raised, Frank Mba would want to react to them. But we'll take a short break. We'll be right back.
Well, it seems that's what a lot of people have resorted to right now, prayers. They're talking about, committing everything into the hands of God. But has the Nigerian police committed everything into the hands of God as well? Or what are they doing about situations like what we just witnessed, what was just chronicled for us in Niger State? Over the Yuletide as well, people had challenges. A lot of people thought very critically about how they were going to make trips to their hometowns or to be with their loved ones. And oftentimes it wasn't very pleasant. CP Frank Mba is still here with us in the studio. I'm sure you want to, first of all, respond to a number of issues raised by Mr. Makri in Lagos and also take on this issue of banditry, which is really very sad to, see on TV.
Okay, let me start from what Makri said. And, of course, he captured the entire challenges clearly. Starting from the fact that the strength of the Nigeria police the strength of the entire security forces in this country, whether you're talking about the police, the DSS, the Nigerian military, when you look at their strength and juxtapose that with the population of the country and then the land mass, you know that we are actually walking on a very thin line, and we're actually miracle workers that we're keeping this country the way we're keeping them. Officers and men of Nigerian police force are working 24 hours, 7 days, 30 days a week, 24 hours, 7 days a week, and working round the clock to make sure that we're able to provide a safe and secure environment for our citizens to live in. I actually acknowledge the fact that indeed we've had challenges, particularly when it comes to issues of kidnapping and banditry. Like you also noted initially, the hub of kidnapping used to be in the southern part of this country. We've been able to stabilize situations in the southern part of this country. Most states in the southeast, where you used to have a lot of kidnappings today, we've been able to stabilize situations. And the south, we've also been able to stabilize situations in those areas. Our major problem today is actually in the northern part of the country. We are also dealing with this, and we will never check our responsibilities.
Why is it that the solutions that were employed in the southern part of the country, why are they not working for the northern part of the country?
Part of the problem with the northern part of the country is actually the land mass. If you look at the northern part of this country, take for example Niger State, for example. If you look at the size of Niger State is probably bigger than about 3 states in the south, all lumped together, and so when you get distress calls from one particular part of the local community, it might take you like 4 hours. 5 hours, 3 hours for you to be able to get there. And so part of the solution, and beyond that, is also the fact that the northern part of this country is clearly closer to the Sahel region. If you look at the devastation that have happened in the Sahel region, the collapse of Muammar Gaddafi regime, the free flow of arms within that area of Libya to Niger, to Chad, to the destabilization of the Central African Republic, the challenges in Mali, the fight between the different factions of combatants in Mali. And these areas are clearly closer to the northern part of the country. So part of the things we've been doing has also been taking up the arms smuggling syndicate and taking them out. And of course, if you follow, you see that in the past 1 year, we've been able to dismantle quite a lot of these organized syndicates that are dealing with arms smugglings. And we need to begin to deal with some of those issues in order to weaken the armory and the holding capacity, the firearm holding of some of these bandits. If you also look at some of the specialized operations we've carried out, Kaduna-Abuja Highway hitherto, when the leadership of IGP Adamu came on board, was clearly impassable. Today, we've been able to stabilize the situation with the launch of Operation Pofada. Of course, once in a while you hear some skirmishes taking place there, guerrilla-like attack or staccato-like attacks. But in the main, we've been able to hold our ground and stabilize that situation. In Katsina State, for example, within the first 2 weeks of this year, we've been able to rescue 533 captives, and we've also been able to neutralize about 33 bandits.
Some people will say, well, I don't want to put any motive to it because they're Nigerians and they deserve to be rescued, even though some people will say you prioritize Katsina because the president is from there. What is happening in Niger State? Can you speak to the situation?
Now, the situation in Niger it's also receiving massive attention from us. What we've done in Niger State is actually to deploy the police air access to Niger. Again, that's to enable us close the gap, since we've discovered that the response time is usually longer because of their large landmass. So what we've done is deploy a police air access, deploy some operatives from the tactical, the STS, the Special Tactical Squad, deploy operatives from the IRT and some other specialized operatives who are currently on ground. They are working with the host police command. They are also collaborating with the Nigerian military, the DSS, and of course working in concert with the state government. We want to believe that the same way we've successfully stabilized Zamfara. And if you know the situation in Zamfara before now, Zamfara was practically turning into a killing field. But as I speak to you today, the situation in Zamfara is almost calm. We have been able to deal with the security challenges in Zamfara up to like 80%. We still have about 20% challenges, and by God's grace, we are replicating what we've done in Zamfara. We'll try to replicate them in Niger State, and it's just a matter of time, and we'll be able to deal a permanent blow.
Are they really
the
land grabbers? The people who are attacking these people, is their motive to grab land from the people, from the natives?
Again, there are a combination of factors. There are, of course, there are some of the cattle rearers who actually combine cattle rearing with banditry. And then
banditry to what end is the question?
Economic. I mean, when you take person when you kidnap persons and all you want is ransom, then it's purely an economic crime.
Yeah, because one of the respondents there alluded to the fact that people are already leaving the area. So
it is a whole lot of these crimes are purely economic in nature, and again, there are also issues that has to do with migration. There are also some of these bandits we've arrested. We've also found out that they are not Nigerians. And that's also part of the reason why we are strengthening the security around the borders. The Inspector General of Police was in Niger recently, where he held meetings with his Nigerian counterparts. And all we're doing now is setting up a joint border patrol between the Nigerian police authorities and their Nigerian counterparts.
Is there a reason why you're reluctant to talk about land grabbing? I mean, is it a reality or not?
No, I don't really see it as essentially a land grabber thing. I think these are pure crimes, because if you say land grabbing, it's for me, you might be giving it a different coloration. For me, this is a crime. It is a crime. It is a crime in all facets, in all definitions.
Land grabbing will also be a crime.
And so I want to call it by its name. And that gives me that platform to begin to deal with it as a police officer.
You know, Mr. Mumba, I'd like to focus on something. You talked about how policemen are miracle workers. And I think that for a lot of Nigerians, when they sit, yes, we have grievances with the police, but for majority of Nigerians, when they sit and they, look at their police force, they will agree with you to a large extent that indeed, over the years, especially when we look at how Nigeria police has evolved, starting from the training, for instance. It's not today that Channels Television did a coverage of the Nigeria Police College, and see where people who are going to be protecting us are being trained. Thankfully, things were able to change. We don't know how perfectly they changed, but at least there was some improvement as a result of the searchlight which was beamed there. The question now is, within the force itself, after people have been recruited and after they become officers, what are we doing about boosting the morale of those, who are there so that they're able to give their best? The work itself is challenging enough. only recently you were promoted, thankfully, and no one can say you didn't deserve your promotion. However, it would seem that as a result of, would I say, staccato promotions, it has caused bad blood within the police itself. Are these issues, important enough to the police to address so that at some point, we're not going, challenges are already difficult enough. We're not going to be going forward with people who do not feel any morale to be able to do the job.
Okay. Marcus, I think you've taken me on a long ride, so let me start from somewhere. The truth again is, I'm glad you did a thorough analysis and actually admitted that looking at the background under which we function and looking at the very asphyxiating environment we operate, sometimes almost poisonous environment that we operate, it is indeed right for us to actually be called miracle workers. And the truth here is, no police agency anywhere in the world can rise above its society in terms of how the society wants it to operate. Every society, every community, every state gets the type of police it deserves. No matter how the police leadership tries, again, you must have the backing of the political authorities for you to make progress. And in terms of funding, in terms of provision of logistics, in terms of remuneration, in terms of retirement benefits, these are all the things that come together to determine how effective and how motivated a police force might be. If you are in a police establishment where your take-home pay can't really take you home, you are in a police establishment where if you die in the line of duty, your families, your kids, your wife are abandoned. If you are in a police agency where if you retire, you can't guarantee to live for the next 5 years. And you are in a police environment where your office accommodation is a problem for you, operational tools are problems, then certainly it will be difficult for you to give your best. We are glad that some of these things are receiving attention, but a lot still need to be done. For instance, even the piece of legislation that have regulated and guided how the police operate has been neglected. For over 77 years, the Nigeria Police Act was never touched, it was never amended. And that tells you how uncaring some previous regimes have been. And it took the current IG making so much effort, galvanizing the strategic stakeholders and working with the lawmakers and the executive to get this law eventually updated after 77 years. That itself should tell you that something has been fundamentally wrong. And that has been the same.
Sorry to interrupt you. I'm not going to make light of the efforts of the IG because that was a very important piece of legislation which saw light of day. However, would you say that the police is shooting itself in the foot if its own men are aggrieved through an exercise which was carried out?
I was just coming to that.
Let's quickly get to that because
and then let me get
time.
to that. If you also follow the trajectory of this present leadership of the force, since IGP Adamu came to power, a total of 121 and 51 persons have been promoted across all ranks. And within this number, 99,911 are members of the inspectorate and rank and file, which means he paid special attention to the junior ranks. And within the 2 years he has been in office, he has never done special promotion until recently. So he did special promotion only once in these 2 years he has been in office. We've seen some previous regimes where special promotions were done almost every 3 months. And those were the time where the complaints were hitting the rooftop. And so I see in him a man who is committed to actually playing by standards and walking his talk. And again, the leadership of the current Police Service Commission, if you still look at it, look at the current leadership of the Police Service Commission, they've also been very, very strict on issues of promotion. They follow seniority, they follow merit, and in very rare occasion, did they exercise their powers to approve special promotion. So I think we are moving out of that era where you have so much misgivings, so much complaints, so much challenge, so much abnormalities that are tied to promotions. And we might not have gotten to the promised land, but we are clearly way out of the desert.
Is there a message to your colleagues who feel very aggrieved about this?
Again, and in every sense of modesty, this is also a bit sensitive for me to talk about because I've just been recently promoted. So,
understandably.
And that's why I'm walking this line very carefully. But all I can say is that the current IGP, the current leadership of the Police Service Commission are committed to carrying out promotions that are merit-based, carrying out promotions that are in the most just and equitable manner. And that's the principle that have guided their promotions.
Do you believe that the grievances should be looked into?
Clearly.
Okay.
Clearly.
Let's flip this to Lagos now. Ayo.
And just very quickly, Maokwe, ask CP Frankumba one question. You talked about the fact that there is a need for equitable, just, and fair promotion, and that the promotion usually comes based on rank, based on seniority, and all of that. But there are those who, from what Maokwe has said, there are those who complain that they have seen their junior officers promoted over them, and for which reason some of them have resigned, some have been rumored to resign because they are unhappy about that. Is that correct? Does that really happen? Do you get that complaint, just as you have said, that such things do happen in the force?
The truth again is I'm not actually a fit and proper person to speak on this issue because, promotions for police officers are carried out by the Police Service Commission. And so the much I've spoken is what I can actually speak. And I would rather advise that this further conversation on this should be, you should probably try to have further conversation on this topic with the appropriate authorities. And the appropriate authorities here will be officials of the Police Service Commission. But like I've said earlier on, the Police Service Commission is peopled by men of integrity. They are peopled by Nigerians who represent citizens from all walks of life. They represent the various geopolitical zones. They represent the various interest groups. They are professionals. They are people who have track record of integrity. And I trust them to be able to look at all the complaints and do what is right in each in each case.
We spoke about morale. You began this conversation about the numerical strength of our security agencies, and we took it to the level of the morale. If this is happening in the police, is it just or fair to say it's the same in every agency of security in the country? That would definitely affect the fight against insecurity in the country.
Yes, of course. The issue of morale, it's in most of the security agencies. The ones that I know personally about, like the DSS, the present DG came in there, and it was the first thing he addressed. If it was okay, he wouldn't have gone there, you know, but it was the first thing he addressed and tried to make sure that people's morale is raised either by their promotion or their benefits or whatever, you know, or try to keep to the schedule. Because that's one problem we have in the security agencies where, okay, if promotion is going to be for every 4 years or every 2 years, that schedule must be kept to. But when after 2 years you don't promote, then you move on again and everybody starts to feel one kind.
Most of the time, when we talk about security architecture, you know, you can close with this. When we talk about security architecture, we're talking about strategies, we're talking about programs, armory, all of those things, funding. But how significant is this morale on the entire security architecture we're talking about here?
Morale is very, very important. Even in the military, without morale, nobody works. You know, if the morale is not high, then nothing is going to happen. But how do you boost morale? You boost morale by giving the benefits of everybody to them and doing all the necessary things that you have to do. You see, it is not just money. Okay. It's not just money. If I'm in the war front and I'm going to be facing the enemy, and then, of course, my family is in the house, and, you know, if I die, they push them out of the house, I will be worried.
Okay.
You know, so it is very, very important.
All right. Well, Malpe, it's over to you now. But first of all, I have to thank you very much, Dennis Amakri, security consultant and former DSS operative. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, Malpe, you may want to ask CP Frank Kumba about the fact that, you know, the PSC is usually, they usually act only on the recommendations of the IGP. So I don't know if that's relevant to the conversation as you close out on him.
I'm sure he can hear you as he wants to quickly respond to that.
I wonder why.
But I'd rather ask you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd rather ask you, because you said Happy New Year to Nigerians, what they can look forward to in this new year, especially with predictions to security and what the Nigerian police has in store for them.
For us, we will be deepening our processes and operations all across the country, particularly in the northern part of the country, where which has become the epicenter of some of the challenges we're having. We'll be adopting a community-driven approach, and so we'll be deepening our implementation of community policing programs across the country. We will also be pursuing very, very rapidly and very aggressively our intelligence-led policing approaches. Thank God for the strengthening of the Force Intelligence Bureau and the expansion of the Force Intelligence Bureau, which is currently working with these partners, the DSS and the military intelligence.
Just quickly.
And we will also be adopting a technology-aided policing approaches.
I want to really add this. The Judicial Commission sitting in all the states of the Federation, or most of the states of the Federation, are you monitoring, and what steps are you going to take to quickly address some of the outcomes of the judicial panel sittings?
We have police officers actually monitoring and participating in all the judicial commissions sitting across the bulk of the 36 states of the Federation, including the Federal Capital Territory. We are collating, we're documenting events as they occur in those panels. And for us, whether you are looking at the NSAS or the post-NSAS events, there are lessons for us to be learned. And we'll be taking those lessons into our laboratory, and we'll be coming out with customized solutions to deal with some of those challenges we are seeing unveiling in some of those panels.
A fine place to leave it. Commissioner of Police Frank Omba, thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. He is the Force Public Relations Officer of the Nigeria Police. Well, Sunrise Daily continues in a moment. Please stay with us.
Well, thanks for staying with us. Lives and livelihood. It's been a conversation we have had all of last year and doesn't seem to be letting just yet. Nigeria's economy is said to be in a recession, which of course was predicted based on all of the things that happened last year. So many months, many people didn't work, and consequently, from what you heard of also from the Minister of Finance, Nigeria fell into a recession, technically, as she said. But then various agencies, various organizations, various bodies have been having conversations about this matter. The organized private sector, most certainly included, part of which is the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And the Director General of that agency has been speaking and saying some things that are maybe a little scary, but then perhaps hopeful as well. He joins us this morning to have a conversation. Muda Yusuf is DG, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry this morning. Thank you very much for your time as you have joined us. Well, it wasn't particularly a very good thing to see when you put out that economic outlook saying that Nigerians will see poverty, inflation, and debt worsen in 2021. What, in your opinion, brought us here, beyond the recession, of course?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning to you, and good morning to our viewers. Well, it's a number of factors, some of which have been highlighted in your background report. But sometimes the headlines, has a way of projecting some reports and, little sensationalization, if I may say. Things may not be as bad, but things are really very challenging. If you look at what the structure has been or the trend has been with regard to economic performance, I'm talking technically now, from perhaps the worst contraction that we have had in recent times. That was in second quarter of 2020, it was 6.1%. In Q3, we had a lesser contraction of 3.62%. In Q4, we don't have the data yet, but we are likely to see a much lesser contraction. So progressively, I think things are getting better. We have thought that by this quarter, I'm talking of first quarter 2021, or worst case scenario, by second quarter of this year, we'll have been out of recession. Of course, that was based on the assumption that perhaps by now we will not be grappling so much with the pandemic. Because much of what happened last year was triggered by the pandemic, which affected, the global economy generally. It affected our macroeconomic fundamentals because of our dependence on oil, the collapse of oil prices, and there was a pass-through of that to our foreign reserves, to our exchange rate situation, to inflation, access to foreign exchange. So this was the chain of events that led us to where we are. Unfortunately, we are still grappling with the pandemic, and unfortunately, again, it's even seeming to be looking to even be more frightening and more severe from the stories that we have been hearing from the relevant agencies. So that, again, is a major concern. The government is now looking again at possibility of lockdown. We are beginning to see some selective lockdown again. We are beginning to see, a possibility of even further lockdown. And globally, we are beginning to see some restrictions as to where you can go, where you can come from, and so on and so forth. So those challenges are there. But, in all of this, we have challenges that are external, which are not so much within our control. We also have unfortunately, challenges that are internal, some of which are within our control. So if we cannot tackle the variables that are external to us, that are not within our control, we should be able to deal with issues that are within our control. And these issues will be around issues of policy, for instance, getting the right policy environment, getting the right investment climate, getting the right dispute resolution system, improving on the security situation in the country, improving on the situation with the ports, the clearance of cargo, the transportation system, the energy system, and the general environment that can, inspire a lot more confidence in the economy. Those things are within our control. So when we are faced with this kind of situation, I think these are some of the things that we should be looking at. It's not as if the government has not been doing something. The government has been doing quite a lot, I must admit. We know what the central bank has been doing in terms of providing liquidity to support investment. The government has also been trying to push some reforms around the petroleum downstream. We now have the talk about the petroleum industry bill. We have seen what is happening with the electricity tariff, even though some of these policies are not quite popular. But in a situation like this, and if you want to build an economy that is sustainable, some of these things are inevitable. So that is what the situation is. But more importantly, is to create the environment that will inspire confidence, because economic recovery flows from investors' confidence. It flows from
Just
the growth of
one.
investment.
A good number of things that you have mentioned are quite significant, Mr. Yusuf, but let's decrypt some of these issues that you are raising so people can understand, and then we can, connect the dots, if I can put it that way. Well, you have proposed that the right policies will help to ameliorate some of these things, these worst case scenarios that you have painted, and if we execute these policies right, it is one thing to have the policies, and you would agree with me that one of the challenges a good number of people, including your good self and so many others like you, have put out there is not a problem of policy or laws or regulations, it's in the execution. So if you are going to decrypt some of the challenges that we're having, would you say it is systemic? Is it the policies? Is it the systems? What exactly are the issues that are mitigating growth? We'll come to the economy proper, the operations of the economy. You've said something about MSMEs, but if we're going to decrypt some of these issues, what exactly are the issues? What are the things that are stemming the tide of growth in the real sector or any sector of the economy?
Well, basically, they are what I will call the investment climate factors or investment climate variables. Basically, that is what they are. And policy environment is very key. Because if you said policy is not the problem, but sometimes, a number of times, policies can be the problem. Because if your policy is not right, there's no way you can incentivize investment. And when we are talking investment now, we are not talking about just local investment. We are talking about even foreign investment. Because if the economy is down, you need to inject some oxygen, some energy into the economy. And this will come either from the way we are able to boost consumption, for instance, in the economy, the way we are able to boost investment in the economy, or what we are able to do about exports. Basically, these are the key things. So if we take the policy environment, for instance, the foreign exchange policy environment is very critical to investment. It's very critical to the inflow of capital. Because if you are dealing with a situation where you have declining foreign reserves as a result of the collapse of oil price, you need to look at other ways in which you can encourage the inflow of foreign exchange. One of those ways is, for instance, is the diaspora remittances. Annually, we have over 20 billion US dollars inflow into this economy from diaspora remittances. Happily, the CBN only recently came up with some policies, at least to create an environment that will encourage a lot more of those remittances to come in. It's a policy matter. The more we're able to liberalize those inflows, the better for the economy. So we commend what the CBN has done around that, but we need to still look, dig deeper and see what other things we can do to encourage more of these funds to come in. This is what happens in many other economies around the world. It is not enough for government to be directly injecting capital. It is more important, that is important, of course, but it's even more important to encourage other capitals to flow into the economy. Then we have the foreign direct investment.
Well, on
The
that,
foreign
Mr. Yusuf, just one
critical.
moment. My apologies. On that, talking about the investment climate, there was a concern that the office of the vice president, was had to champion, and that's the ease of doing business in Nigeria. You would remember that they came up with this Presidential Enabling Business Environment Committee in Nigeria, and they had two states, Lagos and I think it was Kano, that were the pilot states to do some things, adjust the systems to facilitate or speed up investments for anyone who is coming into the country. One would have expected that kind of program, first of all, you may want to speak to how effective that action of government was, and if replicating that all across the nation would have helped or will help to stem the tide of some of the issues that LCCI has raised.
Well, that is important, but Ayo, it is very important that I land on this policy conversation. I will come back to what you said. We need foreign direct investments. The foreign exchange policy environment is also critical to that. We have been talking about the exchange rates unification and all of that. That is even part of what we have in the economic sustainability plan of government. The progress in that direction, of course, we are beginning to see some commendable movements, but we need to do a lot more because it's affecting the disposition of foreign investors into the economy. Capital importation, of course, we have global challenges, but if the environment was right, the capital importation will improve. The same thing is affecting the portfolio flows into this economy. For some time now, the portfolio flows has practically stagnated because of the policies around forex. Then we have the export proceeds. The export proceeds are also very critical. If you are in this kind of situation, and one of the benefits of a weak currency, which we currently have, is that it creates a better environment, a good incentive for exports. We may not be exporting much, but even the little that we export, we need to encourage those who are in that space. I know what challenges the exporters have been facing in terms of the forex policy, in terms of the remittance of their proceeds, in terms of the appropriateness of the reward that the system is allowing them to get from their exports. If you have a foreign exchange rate where the market rate that is generally perceived to be what is the market is over 400 or 450 or 470, an exporter comes with his export proceeds and says, you should come and take 386 or 385 or something like that. They are discouraging exports. These things are very important. So while we deal with the demand management side of foreign exchange, we should also be deploying supply incentives, policies to incentivize supply into the forex market. So having said that, you talked about the ease of doing business. We must commend the ease of doing business office, which is being driven by the vice president and Dr. Jumoke Oduwole. They have been doing great work. We interact with them and we are seeing some impact. We are seeing what has happened, for instance, around the KAMA, the new KAMA Act that we had, KAMA 2020. It touched a whole lot on the environment, especially around SMEs. We are seeing quite a lot of movement around CAC and the rest of them. Of course, there are some effort, but there are still some very fundamental issues around the business environment that we need the collective, engagement and support of all the agencies of government, including the presidency. For instance, go to the ports. We have been on the port issue for how many years now? Talk to an average investor, the kind of experience they go through when they want to clear their cargo, ranging from the challenges within the ports, the processes, very cumbersome processes within the ports, documentation issues with the customs. These things are very, very fundamental. If you look at the ease of doing business report that you said, one of the lowest points in that report is what we call the cross-border trade issues, international trade transactions. Of course, it's good to chase revenue, just as the customs used to say. But what is the point in getting revenue and destroying investments? You don't just assess an organization based on the revenue that it generates. You also assess the organization based on the impact on the investment environment. The customs, for instance, has a dual mandate. The mandate of revenue generation, the mandate of trade facilitation. We hardly talk about trade facilitation issues. And a lot of investors, manufacturers, they face a whole lot of frustration in this area. So we are still waiting for reforms to take place around the ports. This is very critical.
Okay.
And of course, we have the way the investment around infrastructure, around security. These things have far-reaching implications for investment. Investment is not just about oil companies, telecoms. Those are important. But the agricultural sector accounts for about 23% of our GDP. What is happening to that sector now, especially in the current security environment? So these are some of the things that we need to worry about when we talk about getting the economy to recover.
All right. Well, Malkwe has a number of questions for you. Malkwe?
Indeed, and I really hate to add to our worry, but, it's something that also stares us in the face, which is this question of debt. Only this last couple of days, it came out that we spent about 3.3 trillion naira servicing debt alone last year, and we're set to borrow some more. We're looking at a dormant account, we're looking at unclaimed dividends, etc., etc. What are your thoughts as to the size of Nigeria's debt on the long run? And do you think that the monies that we're getting from the debts we're taking on, we're spending in the right areas in order to grow our economy in such a way that we can pay back these debts?
Well, thank you, Malkwe. We need to look at the structure of our spending in order to be able to assess whether indeed the debt we get, we are spending on what we should regard as our topmost priorities. Because the priorities that are topmost or that are uppermost at a time like this are spendings that will improve the capacity of the economy to recover. Because this economy is very big. It's a big economy. It's the biggest economy on the continent. So there's a lot that can happen within the domestic economy itself. Even if you don't reckon so much with the globe, a lot can happen. A lot of momentum can be generated within the economy if the spending structure is right, if you spend in a way that actually improves or focuses on things that will improve productivity. And one way to assess this is to look at the structure of the budget. Year in, year out, the budget has been almost, skewed heavily in favor of recurrent spending, cost of governance. At the end of the day, when we relate the actual releases and expenditure between capital and recurrent, most times you have just about maybe 20% on capital. And this is not just only about the federal, it's even also about the states. Because when we talk about these investment climate issues, it's not just only a federal issue. because we tend to focus almost entirely on the federal government. The state governments have a major responsibility. The local governments have a major responsibility. And in these two levels of government, there are all sorts of accountability issues that sometimes we don't focus on to ensure that those who are in charge of the resources of the nation are also accountable across all levels of government. Now, even the little capital component that we have, what component of that are we committing to infrastructure? I admit there has been some progress, railways, investment in the railways and the roads and all of that. But we can do a lot more by the way we allocate resources, by the way we review the cost of governance, so that we can have a much better balance between recurrent and capital expenditure. And not just capital, infrastructure spending. That is what will make the difference.
Question
We have
to
seen
you,
some inflation figures and
Mr.
all
Yusuf,
of that.
I hate to interrupt you, but my key question to you is, are you comfortable with the level of debt that we have right now? And especially when you look at where we're spending, our priority for this spending. You've talked about our priorities. There has been some controversy. You've mentioned the fact that, yes, indeed, we have some infrastructure spending, but there have even been controversy as to, where these rail lines are located or which ones we have prioritized. What are your thoughts on that? And, speak to your level of comfort on our level of debt.
I was trying to link this to your question. The question is that it is not so much the debt per se that is the problem. It's the way we spend the money that we get from these debts. That is one. Then it's also the kind of debt that we incur. Some debts are more expensive than others. Because if you look at the budget now, just as you said, we are spending over 3 trillion on debt service. And one thing about debt service is that it is a first line charge. So if during the year you have a major revenue shortfall, the first priority in spending will be debt service. Sometimes it can take as much as even 50% or more of the resources that you have. It is when you have settled the debt, that is when you begin to deal with other commitments. So the issue is about how we spend the money, and that is why I was relating to the structure of spending, and that is where the worry is. The worry is not so much about the debt, but how are we able to deploy the resources from the debts to ensure that we make the economy more productive, particularly by supporting infrastructure investment and by supporting issues of security. Because security is becoming a major problem now, even in the investment environment. So that is the answer to the question.
Yes, just before we close, Mr. Yusuf, my apologies.
Fiscal Responsibility Act.
Just a moment. Just before we close, speak to that. What you said about the MSMEs recording up to 2.7 billion naira loss in the year gone by alone, and what are the hopes for them in this year? Because, of course, as you know, they are quite a number, quite a percentage in the economy.
Well, they are very critical in the economy. If we talk about job creation, poverty reduction, and all of that, the MSMEs are very critical. Now, the figure that you mentioned has to do with the outcomes of or the impact of the NSAS, the kind of losses that were suffered, and that was just in the Lagos area. If you take it on a national level, the figure is much more than that. So it was a result of the shocks that they suffered from the NSAS, and even more importantly, from the various lockdowns that we had. Because the SMEs are not that, they don't have the capacity to absorb so much shocks. Some of them live on day-to-day basis. If you disrupt their businesses for 2-3 days, their system will collapse. So the responses, the COVID protocols, the restrictions and all of that created a major shock to many of them. And even now, as we're even trying to grapple with the new wave of COVID, many of them are beginning to crumble. Because some of the key sectors that generate activities for these MSMEs are now practically again under lockdown. They are talking about the entertainment industry, for instance. You look at the impact on the caterers. You look at the impact on those who are doing decoration. You look at the impact on those who are renting the halls, the event centers, the musicians, the tailors, the fashion designers, the makeup artists. All sorts of people make their living around some of these sectors.
Well, Mr.
So
Yusuf,
this is why
you have definitely given the federal government and the state governments, we weren't even able to talk about the state governments at all, a list, a to-do list this year, and we can only hope that, they will be able to take on these issues that you have raised and help the economy revamp and put, as the Vice President said, money in the pockets of Nigerians. But for now, we have to thank you very much for being a part of this conversation. Muda Yusuf is the Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Marco, just before we go, a few messages have come in. You want to take the first one?
Well, yes, Kola Walaski talking about policing through technology is the title of your tweet. What is the extent of technology deployed by the Nigerian police to deal with the menace of banditry in the country? Using land mass as an excuse for inefficiency shows lack of use of technology, intelligence gathering, and strategy.
Strong one there. Henry also says, lack of a sense of urgency and non-emphasis on results, as would have been clearly stated in the KPIs of appointees into any position in our country, rub off on the expected deliverables and give them room to defend non-performance. Let's change, he says.
And Tony Ajiri, also talking about security, says the only solution to security problems in the country is a decentralized police force. The urgent need to establish state and community policing is staring the authorities in the face. The question now is, who has the political will to bail the cat?
Tony Olalushu says, fresh lockdown is better to reset our understanding and readiness to obey COVID-19 protocols. People are dying.
And Mr. Pali says total number of confirmed cases is 102,601 minus 81,575 discharged and 1,373 deaths equals 19,653 active cases. Well, he's definitely done his arithmetic. So how are we running out of treatment facilities? Or all the billions of naira budgeted can't create facilities for 20,000 active cases? Well, maybe, I don't know. Do you want to attempt an answer to that? Just wondering. Because the truth of the matter is, if you continue at that rate, the chances that you will run out, could be very high. Maybe that's what the authorities are saying, but we can always ask them, to come and clarify if that's what they're saying. But thank you for your tweet.
Well, very, very interesting one there. But, it's a good thing that, of course, these information are out in public domain and people can have their say. Thank you so much for being a part of the program today. Have a wonderful day. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Why does it feel like Friday? It's just Thursday. Well, thank you for watching and thank you for your comments. I'm Malcolm Yusuf. Have a lovely day.